Alright, so FSP has released their new mid-tower, the CMT520, the successor to the CMT510, which I reviewed a little while back. The 510 was an overall nice case, but had some shortcomings that made it a 50-50 case for me. Will the 520 incorporate new features to build off the 510? Let's find out. What's up guys, this is JD from JDTechGear and welcome back to the channel. The CMT520 has changed quite a bit from the 510. 510 was a much simpler case and just had some glass panels all around it. But the 520 brings some style to the front of the case, making it stand out more from the rest of the straight panel cases. The case has tempered glass in the front and in the side. Up top there's no panels at all, but instead a dust filter. Already this case has made improvements with airflow from the CMT510, which was pretty restrictive. The front panel has a decent gap on the sides between the glass and frame, and within the frame there's ventilation slits for more airflow. This is much better for the closed off design from the 510. This is a nice looking case in my opinion, and I like the change around. The front has an aggressive look to it, but there's not too much that detracts from the minimal look, making it overly aggressive. This case is also packing some value too. There's 4 RGB fans that come included with the case, along with a nice fan controller in the rear of the case. The fans have a reflective ring around the inside of the frame, which reflects the light emitted from the fan. The fans are recessed a bit into the case and aren't pushed up straight up against the glass, cutting off airflow, so that is crucial and it's done right, thankfully. The only unfortunate part is that there is no dust filter in the front of the case, but there is a dust filter on the top and another for the PSU. The PSU just slides out, and that's great to see over the typical dust filter that you usually see, which is held in with metal tabs for the PSU. Side panel removal is standard with the 4 thumb screw design again, but I would like to see something easier or different sooner or later as far as removal goes. Also, there's no black border on the edge of the tempered glass for handling. That's not a huge deal, but be mindful to not grease up the edges too much while handling it. Front panel removal is much simpler this time when compared to the 510. All you have to do is pull off the panel, but it is a bit tough to pull off, just to keep that in mind, so don't be afraid to put a little force into it. Unfortunately, the front I/O is connected to the front panel, which makes building with the case much more difficult than it needs to be. The front I/O should be attached to the frame and not the panel, but you can unscrew the front I/O connections with 4 different screws. Trust me, it's worth it rather than trying to deal with the front panel swinging around everywhere while building with this case. Speaking of the front I/O, there's 2 USB 2.0 ports and 3.0 ports, power and reset button, audio jacks, and an LED button. The LED button controls the RGB fans connected to the controller, which is nice. I wish there was a USB Type-C port, but perhaps in the next incarnation we will have it, but I would really like to see it on this case. The power button feels really nice to press and has a satisfying click to it when pressing it, although it looks a bit too familiar to the Cooler Master logo. I'd rather just see a different shape used that doesn't emulate any other brand logo designs. This case supports eATX to mini ITX motherboard sizes, and yes, this is a mid-tower, so the cable holes will be slightly covered with an eATX board. There's plenty of fan support as well, with room for 3 120 or 140mm fans in the front, 3 120 or 2 140mm fans up on top, and 1 120mm fan in the rear. Radiator support is the same with either a 360mm rad up front or on the top, and 1 120mm rad in the rear. Case dimensions are 495mm long, 215mm wide, and 510mm tall, so there's a lot of space inside the case to work with. Internally, there's room for cables above and beneath the motherboard area, even with an ATX board installed, so cables will be able to be routed from above and below with no problem. There's 2 3.5-inch HDD trays at the bottom of the case, which expand and collapse to install your drive, which is a very simple installation that I like to see. There's 4 SSD mounts, 2 in the rear on a removable SSD mounting tray, and the other 2 mounts are located on the frame, so storage options are adequate. Building in this case was a breeze, installation was easy, and plugging in cables were made easy with a fantastic clearance above and beneath the case like I mentioned earlier, so working with this case was all around easy. Just make sure to remove the front I/O from the front panel and your life will be much easier. In the rear of the case, there's plenty of room for cable management with nearly an inch between the frame and inner wall of the case. Back here you'll find the fan controller, which is really nice quality and not just a PCB. There's connections for up to 8 fans, and there's an RGB header on both sides for connectivity to your motherboard RGB header for software control. The fan headers use a 7-pin fan connector, so the IGO RGB fans that you have probably seen that have popped up on my channel plenty of times, and a couple other RGB fans that are usually imported from the Eastern market usually have these type of 7-pin connections. So those should be able to connect to it with no problem. Also, the fan controller is magnetic, which is awesome. So you can place it wherever you want in the case for your best convenience. Cable management was really easy with this case for me. I was able to mainly organize the cables in 3 separate sections. There's also a lot of tie down points, which does help a lot when doing some cable routing. There's cable routing holes in all the right places, which adds to the ease of cable management. The only unfortunate part is that there is no rubber grommets in this case, and this was another complaint that I had with the CMT510 because that didn't have it either. The 520 should definitely have them. You also notice there's no top to the power supply shroud. That's because it's an extra piece included with the case. You have 2 options for installing your power supply. You can either go through the top and place it into the basement, or you can unscrew the PSU frame in the rear of the case and slide it through there. Getting back to the top piece of the PSU shroud, it's actually an acrylic piece with a mirror-like finish to reflect the light at the bottom of the case. It's held in place with magnetic strips. They're not super strong, but just enough to keep it in place. I really love this addition to the case, and it adds some unique flavor to the design aesthetic. The CMT520 has a major step up in the airflow department, this time from the CMT510. Yes, there's still airflow getting blocked off from the front, but the gap is larger, although it isn't an inch gap, which is recommended by Gamers Nexus for proper airflow for air turning at a 90-degree turn. But there is ventilation slits as well. Not to mention there's plenty of exhaust coming from the top of the case that really helps as well as far as airflow goes. So as you can see, here are the temps that are great with the panels on and off. Even though this system doesn't have high thermal output components, this does show you that it can reliably cool items in this case and makes it safe for putting higher end components in there. The CMT510 was a $100 case. The CMT520 is $110, but with a lot of improvements from the 510, thankfully, especially when considering airflow. For a $110 case, this has to be competitive. This case adds a lot of value, coming with 4 RGB fans, a fan controller, good construction quality, and tempered glass in the front and side. I like the design aesthetic to the front of the case, and I'm really happy with the airflow design with this case. Much better than the 510 in my opinion, although I would like a little bit more of a gap between the glass and the front of the frame on the panel. The mirror PSU cover is a simple yet fantastic addition to the case, and I would love to see more additions like this into future cases since the case market has really stagnated with design for a long time now. The only drawbacks to this case is that there's no rubber grommets, and for $110 they should certainly be included. The front IO is connected to the front panel, although it's removable. Also, there's no mesh dust filter in the front of the case, and there's no USB Type-C port on the front IO. Other than that, this case offers a lot for the value. For $10 more, you could go with the Leon Lee PC011 or Fantex Entho Pro M, but they don't include 4 RGB fans either, so that decision would be up to you. I think that there should be a variant without the fans and made probably, I don't know, around $20 cheaper, because usually the people buying a case in this price tier have their own fans in mind that they want to put into the case. Of course, this is all preferential, so I can't speak on everyone's behalf, just a passing thought that I had. Overall, this is a solid case and it looks great. I like the logo at the front of the case, and it's not overdone. It's actually quite subtle and it looks good while showing off a discrete distinction in branding. I would be more inclined to spend my money on this case over the CMT510, but if this case had rubber grommets, I would buy it without hesitation. So that decision is up to you. If you want to check out the case, there will be a link to it in the description below. I hope you all enjoyed the video and found it helpful. Let me know what you want to see more from the channel. If you're new here and you want to see more videos like this one, consider checking out the rest of the channel and subscribing. Thank you all for watching, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.